now we've talked a lot about digital, obviously, knowing my background and some of the studies you've done into it. And you released a really interesting report talking about the current situation with COVID and the level of disruption that digital or digitalized companies have experienced compared to non-digitalized. And I think your numbers were only 8% of digitalized companies were affected. So one thing I was trying to run through is in a post-COVID world, we're all working remotely now, and it's fine if you're already established in what you're working, it's actually okay to switch remotely. The problem comes when you want to try and do something new. So when you either have to build a new team or go do something, or particularly go and install some kit now. So how does one go digital if you haven't already now in a post-COVID world?
I think the temptation is to give the facetious answer, which is say, don't start from here. I mean,
if you want to get there,
you're right.
Start from here. Yeah.
Well, I know it's not helpful, but the numbers are right. I mean, I like to base things on data, and so we've been building up a database of all of the digitization examples we can find across the industry. The average average thing in this database, well, 60% of them materially lower costs by going digital. 55% of them materially increase production. 25% of them materially lower CO2. And as you say, looking down this list, 80% of these things will be disrupted by COVID if they hadn't been digital. 8% of them will be disrupted now that they are digital. So, the kind of level of disruption is down 90%. I think it's not too late to change operating models, demand assets, digitize processes, and I think it will really step up after COVID. Every asset, there are things that can be done. I always think talking about digital is like talking about history. It's a vast field that covers hundreds of things, and nobody could equate the Napoleonic Wars to the sinking of the Lusitania. So, on one example, you're seeing crawlers that and drones that can inspect assets without having to, dangle somebody precariously on a harness and put them in harm's way, and they end up being lower cost and materially safer. In other examples, you are taking, valves that would literally have been controlled by sending an operative into the field and having them, turn a valve, and the no-brainer of actuating this thing from a control room where you don't have to send somebody out into the field and pay that cost. And this takes out between 30 and 80% of the OPEX of an asset when it's digitized and controlled, remotely. If you look at the ways you can then slimline the way you build these things, if you don't build them to, house people on a platform, you can take out 15 to 30% of the capex, something like $500 million a platform, you can shed. And so there's dozens and dozens of examples of this. But I kind of worry about which ones to
I think
run through. And
in the case of a new
build, there is one example that I really like that I was looking at recently, which is using algorithms to optimize rod pumps. So every single rod pump, every single pump stroke that it does, you can log that on a chart called a dynamometer, which shows the pull on the pump over time throughout the pump stroke. And by using machine learning to analyze these dynamometer readings in real time, you can spot problems early and prevent 5% of the downtime. You can also tweak pumps that aren't pulling at the right depth to the right depths and get another 5% oil out per pump stroke. So overall, here is a 10% uplift in productivity in an asset, that effectively costs you nothing. And this doesn't, require sending, vast numbers of people out into the field either. So I think there are lots of kind of easy wins like this, and the best companies are just doing them across the board.
I think that's a great example because it's an existing asset, and if it's got SRPs, it's probably a fairly old asset as well, I guess. And because that's what first comes to mind when one talks about digital, or certainly to me, and the disruption is, what about the UK continental shelf, where the majority of the assets are actually older? What are the options likely to be? I'm thinking, are the costs of projects going to go up now because it's harder to mobilize people to these assets?
I think you're probably right there.
So the irony being, I guess, what we have seen as, I guess, is an inflection point. So cost of doing digital previously, when it was optional, was actually cheaper than it's going to be now because it will be almost compulsory. But probably we'll see scarcer resources, and mobilizing those resources will be difficult.
I think that's right.